Thanks for joining us for this discussion on redeveloping websites with the committee members of the Chartered Institute of Marketing's Construction Sector Interest Group. As a number of us have recently undergone the process of refreshing, improving or rescoping a brand company website, we wanted to share our learnings and bring the knowledge to everybody. So just some quick introductions and then we'll get underway with the discussion. So I'm Charlotte of Construction Specialist Communications Agency, Morton Waters.
Thanks, Charlotte. Hi, I'm Alex Aldous, Director of Marketing and Communications at Gleeds, which is a global construction consultancy, and Chair of the Construction Industry Group.
I'm Karen Mensah. I'm Marketing Director of Cumming Group International.
Hi, I'm Laurie. I'm Group Marketing and Communications Manager at McLaughlin Harvey, a civil engineering company that operates throughout the UK.
I'm Pete Jeffrey. I'm the Head of Marketing and Communications at Narrow Associates, which is a civil and structural engineering consultancy based in Scotland.
Great, thank you. So I think what we could start with is what are some of the prompts that made you to think that now is a good time to, or a necessary time to consider making amends, making improvements, maybe completely redeveloping a website?
I guess some of the things that, we looked at was that our existing website was quite outdated from a design perspective. So, when we looked at the competitor landscape and actually looked at sort of more design standards, more modern design standards, ours was quite outdated. Low performance as well. So from a metric perspective, we had really high bounce rates, conversions were really low, slow loading speeds, similarly with mobile responsiveness as well, and also a changing business need, right? So that the website wasn't necessarily fit for purpose of where we were or where we wanted to go as a business. So we had an updated service offering that needed to be reflected on the new website. So just some of the things that we considered when we knew it was time to redo our site.
I would say for us it was very similar. Metrics for the marketing team, we were very obvious that bounce rates weren't working the way we thought they were. Customer journeys just didn't seem to make sense to the website. But it was actually our own internal team raising their concerns, I think, that made senior management more aware of it. To be fair, they actually helped with our cause to do it. A lack of information there, really any depth to what services they provided. Project case studies were very vague. Our services weren't even covered, and having that internal buy-in from our team, who are a very big part of the new website build, really helped make our case to the senior management team for our website.
I think I would back up the same kind of thing. When I joined Narrow, there wasn't a marketing team particularly. There was various people. It was kind of run by committee, so various people were doing little bits here and there. I was taken on to kind of revamp that slightly. So the website redevelopment was part of our overall brand redevelopment, but the website in particular it had lots of room for improvement, I will say diplomatically. Just was quite outdated. As Laurie said, like a lot of the case studies were out of date. They weren't really that informative. And yeah, again, it wasn't reflective of the services that we offered. So an update was required.
I think for us, we were a very traditional company. So Cumming Group is a construction consultancy firm. And for the nature of the business, which is much more relationship building, the team never really understood the role in which the website played. And I think as behaviours and people in general were changing, there was always this, if it's B2B, you have to do it this way. And if it's B2C, then you should do it this way. And actually now the two are converging and the behaviours are so similar that they had not taken that into account, essentially. So we had a very basic web presence with a whole load of information on there, but no analytics, no background information on how people are navigating bounce rates. Like Alex mentioned, we didn't even have, reporting set up in the background. So I think it's just as the industry is evolving and people are evolving and, access is so much more accessible now, I think the leaders have decided that actually now it's time to take digital presence very seriously as part of, revenue winning strategies.
Do you know what? Just to that point, I think people expect more from a website now than they ever have done. So yes, it's about raising brand awareness, but, lead generation as well and showcasing all of the great projects and work that, organizations are doing.
Well, I was just thinking that listening to that, there's like multiple different reasons, isn't there? There's like the brand and the positioning that can change and evolve, and whether that is just dictated by changing of service lines or even down to things like location, potentially can drive. But, there's brand and positioning, there's content and that aspect of it. There's the functionality, touching on, not only the structure of the site, but also the technology sitting in the background. Quite often you've got a site that was built in something that is no longer really the best platform for that. And that's a huge driver as well, because then that can just really make a big lag. Things like, I suppose it comes under content, but having active CTAs, calls to action, I think that was your point, Alex, with, having it as a more than just a repository of information, that it's a prompt to get people to do things. And then the consideration of the customer journey and how do you assess that and evaluate it and make sure that it's still relevant for the customer that you want going forward for the business, not the historic customer perhaps.
I'd like to throw in as well, it was important to try and reflect the employee experience at Narrow. Like the website that we had before really had absolutely nothing. So explaining and exploring why it's great to work, why it's great to be at Narrow was a big part of our website redevelopment as well. And I think it's something that can sometimes fall by the wayside when people are speccing the new website or creating a brief.
From an SEO perspective as well, like to keep up with competitors, right? I mean, Google's changing all the time, and actually we need to make sure that our websites are changing and adapting to their changes, because all of us are competing with everyone else across the industry for digital space. So yeah, the SEO challenges, we had outdated practices, poor content optimization, broken links, etc., etc. I think that's really important as well.
I think as well, you see more, and especially when I started out in marketing, the requirement now for people in digital roles because of the importance of stuff like that. I mean, looking at, we, for example, use SEMrush, you could actually have a person just full time managing that aspect, broken links, doing meta tag descriptions, keeping up to date with all that, tracking user journeys, that kind of thing. And I think it's more popular now that role is kind of defined within a business. We're not there yet. I would imagine in a few years we probably will be, because there's still a great importance put on a website from a tendering point of view for new clients, and that's only going to keep growing, I think.
So the next point is around some of the critical elements in briefing that make success more likely. I know that we've talked about potentially also covering selection of an agency, and I guess that those two things go kind of hand in hand. So perhaps something around, how do you go about selecting an agency or internal teams, and then briefing that out and creating that scope effectively. Perhaps some of the elements of research that need to be done or that go into that phase, that would be really great to cover.
I think one of the things that we did when we looked at, that kind of buy-in from stakeholders and senior management, so put together really, really clear objectives. So, what are those objectives versus business goals? How do they link to that? Put that together into a really clear business case that includes, potential ROI from upgrading the website. To your point, Charlotte, yeah, absolutely. A competitor analysis, like looking across the industry at other sites, even indirect competitors as well, just to kind of see, what they've done and how they're doing it. So with those use cases as well, just back to the point about, so demonstrating really, really clear return on investment, explaining, what that's going to achieve for us with some of the things that we looked at originally.
Senior management was important, obviously making a decision about what we did, but we actually went out to staff. So we did focus groups, we did surveys. We did all our kind of marketing, like Alex said, as a marketing team, of course, we looked at competitors and things, but we really thought it was important to get the voices of lots of different people across our business, because we employ, over 800 people, and seeing some of the comments and things they came back really helped us to then define a request for proposal that we then sent out to agencies, and we were quite clear what the kind of things we wanted to achieve. And as Pete said, it was about actually our employees and how important they were to our company. That was a big part of it, and we made that a key theme in the proposal. But we all had our opinions as a marketing team, as you do, but actually going out and getting opinions from people that don't do marketing every day and thinking, well, actually, that's a really, really valid point, helped us to kind of define and narrow down that scope so we could then go through the process of appointing an agency.
I disagree with you, Laurie, but I would maybe say that when it comes to the actual decision-making process, I think even before you go to an agency, I think you need to be clear in your head about who is actually making that decision. The reason I'm bringing that up specifically, I know I've said about it's all about bringing the employees on the journey. As an employee-owned business, everyone felt like they had a say in everything. And while it was important to try and take people on the journey, there were some frustrations with going down that route. Everyone thinks it's easy enough to knock up a logo themselves. And I vividly remember the agency came with a few new suggested logos. And then about half an hour later, I was getting people who'd knocked one up in Microsoft Paint that they thought was better. It's like, well, you're trying to be positive. Thanks so much for helping out with that. But I think we'll stick with the experts. We'll tweak it thanks to your feedback, which we did. And it was a worthwhile experience. But yeah, I think having the decision-making clear in your head, who's going to make those decisions in the day, I think that's important to have from the start.
So in my past life, when I worked for a different developer, we took exactly the same approach as Laurie, where we sort of, we went out to the business. It was only a small business, but we went out to the business just to understand the challenges that they had with the existing website. So it felt like a lot of consultation, but in the end, it sped up the process of the actual delivery, because we formed a working group, which was, predominantly like the senior directors, but we also surveyed sort of, the asset managers and the construction managers, and to get their feedback. So it was just having that open dialogue, whilst they're not, the wider business isn't, having that decision making, they can't approve, being able to have those conversations and be able to relay back to them that we haven't done specifically this, but actually we've taken it on board and we found a middle way. It was a lot easier to be able to deliver when it got to UX, UI, and that build, essentially.
Yeah. I would certainly say from the agency side, where we have situations where we're dealing with what feels like a kind of enormous committee of people who have opportunity to comment on things, then it can really hold things up. And actually having that, it's great to get that at the beginning so that you can capture everybody's view, with the understanding that not everybody's opinion is going to be carried forward, that it's an opportunity, but it's not a guarantee. And that comes through a filter of a team that is responsible and takes that responsibility and manages that perhaps pushback internally, but that from an agency perspective, when you're getting it from multiple sources, actually you need to know the hierarchy of being able to say, yes, but that doesn't fit with the brand. And that's not the direction that perhaps
the good thing
in the organisation gets to see.
The great thing, to Alex's point, is that what goes into a website is so complex in terms of keywords, SEO, that the management teams don't even know what that is. So you can work quite rapidly with the specialist agency and make those decisions, because I always find that nobody really pays attention until it comes to design.
I completely agree. It's one of the we came across so often is that, content, there's always a kind of standoff almost between content and design. It's like, well, then who moves first? You need the strategy in place to make that decision, but that also, as you say, people are quite cavalier about content, and then they get design, and then they're like, oh my God, it doesn't work. Well, didn't think about it at that point.
I think that's a common thing as well. We were very clear, I think, that content needed to be there first, because, you go and prepare a website, we then give you double the amount of content you were expecting, you've designed something that isn't going to then work to that. And we were very clear that we had to get content first. I'm not going to lie and say we had 100% content before we started building, because it didn't happen. We were rebranding at the same time. You're lucky if we were maybe about 70%, but we tried to get that message across. But it is a bit of an uphill battle, because people are like, well, it's not even been built yet. We'll just get to that part. And that is difficult to get people to keep moving along the journey at the same speed as you. So yeah, from a design point of view, Charlotte, I'm sure that's quite frustrating sometimes, waiting for us to give you everything you need.
I think what's also challenging when it comes to, I know we're moving off the question a little bit, but regarding, content and layout and design of websites and stuff as well, it's a piece of digital infrastructure, right? And we had a fantastic agency. They were absolutely brilliant to work with. And, they would make suggestions on what would work from an online perspective. We would then manage that with stakeholders with the steering group, etc. And actually sometimes have to have quite hard conversations because, they wanted 500 words, but actually 100 words was going to be much better. So it's educating people as well about the fact that, well, no, I know we did it like this last time, but actually the better way, or the more optimized way of doing it is actually like this. And I think those kind of open lines of communication as well with various different stakeholders. I mean, I work for a partnership business, so you've got a series of partners that are all invested in it. So we had a steering group which had a number of people on it, but then there were other people to keep informed as we went along. And it can get quite complex when you have lots of different opinions and lots of different kind of people's views and stuff. And from experience, and I'm sure everyone has felt the same, you're not going to make everyone 100% happy, but actually we got to the end and we just had to push the button. It was probably 90% there, but actually that was good enough because it's evolving. Websites evolve. We're still evolving it now. We've got phase 2, 3, and 4 coming up. So, I think just open communication. Just to add, with regards to the agency, so Charlotte, you asked, and I think Laura, you said it before. We had a really clear RFP that we sent out. We gave a series of agencies a timeline with all of the information that we had in there to come back to us on, and then we held meetings to kind of go through how would they deliver it, any questions they had for us, to give them a chance to really understand a bit more about what we wanted to achieve from the site and where we kind of saw the future of the site going as well. It's really important to me that I get a feel of a relationship with an agency as well. I don't just want an agency that are just going to tick boxes on a bit of I want an agency that is going to challenge and is going to push back and is going to actually something can be done better or done in a different way. That to me is a really quality agency that you can build that partnership with. And that was one of the most important things, because when things go wrong, or maybe things get delayed or whatever, having the backing of an agency that is a proper partnership with you makes the world of difference. And it definitely did in our case.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, actually, because we did interviews as well. We had people that looked really, really good on paper, really kind of well-known agencies. But when we met, the kind of communication wasn't there. You just sometimes don't have that vibe, if you like, that you're going to be able to work together. So that was a really clear kind of idea in our mind that we needed somebody we could work together with, because it's a process. This isn't just a couple of weeks and it's done. You're working on this for months, sometimes longer than that, to build the idea you've been working on for probably a year before that. So actually, as much as some of the proposals were very good, when it got to let's talk through who we are and who you are, it just didn't match up. And sometimes that happens, but you have to find someone you're comfortable with to go through quite a big project. I think you have to be comfortable from the off that actually if you have a problem, you can call them up and you can talk through that and get the best solution.
It needs to be an agency that will challenge you as well. An agency that's just going to go, okay, yeah, we'll just do whatever it is you're suggesting. That's not great. You need to question you. They need to challenge you on things that you're requesting and come up with better solutions. If they know of a better way of doing it, then they should feel comfortable that they can tell you that and discuss it. And yeah, there was a few times that we absolutely abandoned what we'd originally wanted and went with what the agency had suggested because it was the better thing to do, and they backed that up.
Yeah, I would definitely say from an agency perspective of being open to listening to what your agency is saying, not necessarily, saying 100% you've got to agree, but to be open to it and to, as you say, it's a partnership because everybody's trying to get to an end result because the agency wants something that they're really proud of as well. And so collectively, that's what you're working towards. It's not a kind of, you shouldn't be there just to fulfill a brief thinking it's not going to work, but, it's what they want. And it's something that everybody should get to the end of. Like you say, Alex, so there's never an end, but, get to the end of that kind of, final reveal and feel really proud of that. And that you had a really good part in it, not just that it's done and you can move on to something else.
But that is a great point, though, Charlotte. It's not just about us as the kind of company getting our end result as well. It's for the agency too, because it's something built and they're proud of as well.
Okay. So we've talked about kind of having different approaches like steering committees. In terms of how do you gather and process the feedback from people within the business? Any other suggestions around how that's best achieved, or is it best kept as a very closed shop? What kind of thoughts and experiences did you have around that?
So, as I said, we went and we asked people and things, but when it came to decision making, yes, it was very much a closed group. It wasn't just marketing that were in that group. We included other departments across the business, but we pulled ideas together. We discussed them. It was really what was right and tied in with when we were rebranding at that time. But we regularly communicated with the business what we were going to be doing. It wasn't that we didn't want feedback on it. It was more to say, well, actually, we've taken all this. These are the bits we think we can run with, and keeping them updated in the process, because it wasn't a short process. It went on for probably, I would say, 9 to 12 months. So it's actually keeping them interested and knowing that we have asked you for your feedback. We promise we are doing something with it and keeping them regularly updated. But once we'd done that kind of initial kind of chats with people, surveying, we then kind of took that on and moved it forward with that kind of group in the business. That was the way we did it, in regular communication to let everybody know that we were moving forward.
It was very similar for us as well, actually, Laurie. So, the business is structured into sectors, services, regions, countries, etc. So you had, sector leads that were invested in their pages, their content. We had service leads that were the same. And then also looking at, okay, how do we show the breadth of, our offer globally as well? We originally did sort of focus groups. I'm pretty sure we conducted a survey at some point, and then had more kind of structured, targeted meetings to really understand, what is it? What does good look like for you? What's what does good look like for you? What do you want out of a website? But then took that into a much smaller steering committee. That then, as we went through each phase of delivery, we then went back to that steering committee and, made those decisions on behalf of the business, while also keeping any other kind of senior leaders informed. I think it's really, with such a large site, I mean, we had 350 pages, I think, in the end, of content to write, and all sorts of different kind of elements to put into the site. It's really difficult when you have, I would say, more than, six people in a steering group to move forward. And ultimately, we had a deadline. I mean, we had, I think, 9 months to do the website in, which was no mean feat. So hence why we've got phase 2, 3 and 4 coming.
I was going to ask, Alex, in terms of content creation, when you think about that breadth of offering, and the fact that there are multiple divisions, and I'm sure it's the same with all of you, that there are always some that find that easier to provide and to be the resource for, and then some that are it's just quite hard to get that information out of them. I don't know if you had other kind of things around the mapping of that or the process for those.
So once, I mean, our website was a completely new site, and actually I don't think it had been looked at for 5, 6, 7 years. So all of the content that was on the existing site hadn't been updated for a while. It was all old, and our service offer had changed to a degree where we quickly realised that we had to rewrite the whole site. We even took a decision to take off a load of our case studies because they were so outdated, and to work to try and get new case studies on the site. That's why at the moment there's 90 odd or 50, 90, something like that. Whereas before there was 300, but they were kind of 2 sentences a case study. Now we do project profiles, they're kind of 200 words, etc. So, content was hard. It was really hard, and it was a massive team effort. We also use copywriters. I also had other people in the business step up. I can remember spending 3 or 4 hours one afternoon with our head of client accounts. And he said to me by the end, he said, "You know what? My brain hurts so much from going through this content with you. I don't want to work in Marcoms." Crisps got us through. It was a real team effort with the content. I mean, we ended up rewriting, I would say, 90% of the website. It was long hours. Everyone was really dedicated to it. But what it allowed us to do was for everyone in the team to really understand more about the business. We've now got a website that the content is 100% up to date. It reflects who we are as a business now. We spent a lot of time with sector leads, service leads, talking to them about their offer, what because yes, okay, it's all the same company, but actually what our energy business offers to their clients is slightly different to what our healthcare business offers to their clients. So we had meetings with each of them. We then produced the content off the back of that meeting once we had the wireframes and stuff, so we knew how much, how many words, etc. And then we went back and forth with them. Case studies were challenging, because obviously you've got the client sign off aspect to that as well. So we've still got hundreds of case studies, which we're still writing them on a kind of daily, weekly basis to put onto the site. My advice would be, and this is the approach that we took, we launched our site at probably 85% ready. If we waited till it was 100%, it probably still wouldn't be launched now.
No, they are living, breathing things. And what you're looking for is consistency and coherence, and that's what that opportunity presents, is to go back and review all of that and to make all of those case studies, for example, even though they're different sector, vertical markets, then they're coherent and consistent. But there's still going to be new ones coming on. So even if you'd waited to complete all of that set, there's always going to be another set. So
I think it's realising as well, like we were in a similar situation. I mean, we had over 300 case studies, and I remember senior management had kind of said, are they all going to go over the new website? And you're like, well, no, some of these case studies are, nearly 10 years old. We've done bigger and better since. There are landmark case studies and things that need to move over. Of course they do, but there was no way we were going to have people sitting there and they would have to get rewritten, as Alex said, because I mean, some of them were a couple of lines. You didn't know why they were really there in the first place, but you had to actually just kind of say to people, we need to draw a line here. This is the mark in the sand, if you like. And going forward, we're going to be doing, updating these on a regular basis. We're going to archive after a certain amount of time and kind of set those rules, I think, before even the website was made. And I think in terms of content, I mean, I'm under no illusion that I'm a subject matter expert in everything we do. It's, you have to use the people within your business. So we had people that preferred to have a bit of a stab for ideas of what they wanted to be on there. But actually, as Alex said, sitting down in the room with somebody and just letting them talk about something they're passionate about, it's actually makes it so much easier to do content. I love to go to site and speak to our site managers, project managers. You get so much more than you do in an email. You'll get like a couple of lines back, but spending an hour over a cup of coffee, I could write, a really, really long case study because they're really passionate about their jobs. So making that time to sit down with those individuals and then writing the copy off the back of that, I think was one of the best things we did. It made it so much easier because you felt you understood it more.
So we come to big learnings. If you were starting again tomorrow, what would you?
I think a very obvious one, that this is probably coming from having worked on agency side briefly. I'm sure, Charlotte, you've got experience of this. Set your budget. Don't go to an agency and say, oh, just tell us what you think it should be. That's a waste of everybody's time. And I know there is a temptation to do it because you feel like you need to have that information before you can go and really present the business case and get sign off from your board or whoever has to set the budgets. But I think it's important to do that before you even go out to an agency. It can be a range, but you need to have some kind of budget in place before you even go to an agency.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Be transparent. Going back to the point about having that vibe with your agency, it is so important to be transparent early on in terms of what the budget is. I mean, like any website, we got changes constantly. So, we thought we developed a really strong brief. But as you move through the process, you tend to move away from that brief because of, people changing their minds and they want different types of functionality, which needs a bespoke built module and having that agency that can tell you, well, okay, we can do that, but it's going to increase your budget by X. I think that is spot on about transparency on money.
I would definitely say so. A really good brief needs to come with a budget because you can't, and no reputable agency is going to look at the budget and think, great, well, let's make this as light and low as we can to maximise the project, because it's just not going to happen. But I think also if you don't know the budget, or you can't get internal buy-in maybe for what you think is probably likely to be the budget, start with a scoping session and pay for that part of it and that discussion, because then you can also see how you work together, but then get a realistic idea of what that budget's going to be, and that you can work around it then.
I think also having foresight of where the business is heading. So, my last company, predominantly workplace developer, but they were moving more into build to rent. They were diversifying their portfolio. So having that foresight that is where they were going, because the website would have to evolve very quickly, property search and all that stuff that you wouldn't normally deal with when you are leasing offices. Actually, you need a lot more additional functionality. So having building a structure that is flexible as well, finding out from the offstart where the business is heading, I think is also invaluable.
I would completely agree with the flexibility point that you've just made there, Karen. I think we all will have experienced challenges, unexpected challenges throughout projects like this, and I think having one of the biggest learnings was being flexible being adaptable allows us to work with the agency, or allowed us to work with the agency to stay on schedule and within budget, and actually if it went out of budget, by having that great partnership with them, they were really open about that. And, it was, well, do you want this or do you want this? So yeah, flexibility is really key. One of the biggest learnings, if I was to do this again now, and I've worked on multiple website projects, but from the latest one was underestimating the content workload. I think, we waited till the wireframes were ready, so we knew how many words, etc., to put on each of the pages and stuff. But the strain and the pressure on the team, even with external copywriters, to put together that content was pretty bad. Kudos to my whole team, because they all did an amazing job. But we had a quarterly meeting, and we actually didn't do the meeting. We just spent 3 hours kind of writing, making up all the bits that were missing or 2 days before launch. I'm sure we've all experienced that, but I think, just starting the content, if it's a complete rewrite, starting the content writing a lot earlier was probably one of my biggest learnings from the website we've just done.
I would completely agree with Alex. That was my biggest lesson learned, if you like. Underestimated quite how long it would take. You're obviously going out and you're meeting loads of people, which is great. You're having all these meetings. Those meetings take time. That's just your note-taking things. You've got to go and do all that. We had a content plan. We kind of mapped it out. If I'm honest, I think we started kind of design. I think we should have maybe, got a bit of a better handle on content. I think that would have probably been fairer to our agency, if I'm being absolutely honest. But yeah, I completely underestimated how long content would take. I remember I came in the office on a Sunday just writing case studies, and it was just kind of one of those things, thinking, why have we let it get this far? But you have a deadline, you've communicated it to the whole business, this is the day it's going live, this is happening. Yeah, totally underestimated it, but you can't move it. You've said now, it's there, it's gone out in a company email, it can't move. And yeah, that was, I think, it's something you really have to think about. And I thought we were being really realistic, and yeah, we could have probably done with another couple of months, if I'm being honest, but the team did work really hard to get it over the line.
I was, with regards to deadlines, so I can remember at the beginning, I had a deadline in my head of when we needed to deliver it, but originally I just said, it'll be early summertime. I gave myself a bit of extra time, and anyone asked for a date, I'd say, June sometime. I didn't want to commit, because that's the thing, Laurie, like you've just said, you give a date to the rest of the business, and absolutely they expect to see it turned on that date. I mean, we didn't confirm the final launch date until, I would say, probably a couple of weeks before launch, because I kept my cards quite close to the chest with that, because it's hard, and things, unexpected delays come up all the time. And out of interest, like, what did you commit? Did you launch it on the date that you?
We launched it on the date we said we were going to do it. We rebranded at the same time though. Like it was good. It was good to do it in tandem in a way. There was loads of lessons. There was nice crossovers between the two. But if I'm honest, it was a lot of work to take on because we were quite a small team, and yeah, a lot of lessons definitely learned. But I think the content, yeah, we were naive because there was so much other stuff going on with the rebranding things. But we did launch on the date we said we were going to launch. But like you, was it 100% perfect? I don't think it was, but we're still developing. We're going through just now. We're making a load of changes in the next few weeks to freshen it up a bit. We've been seeing kind of user journeys where we can improve. So it's a constant changing thing. But was it perfect 100% when it launched? No, it wasn't. And I think you'd probably drive yourself a little bit insane trying to get it there for that day. I just don't think it would have worked.
Well, that sounds like a success, but I know that there have been generally, they've been received really well, all the recent relaunches, and I don't know if anybody wants to touch on those or some of the comments that they've had from internally about, because I think it's nice.
Sorry, Pete. I was
just going to say, for all that I've brought up, that it was a challenging process, having to not constantly, but regularly go to the entire team. In the end, we came up with a website and a new brand that I'm really happy with, really proud of, and it's something that everybody's got behind. So I think it can be a very frustrating process doing a rebrand and a website, but if you do it well, if you do it properly, if you've got a good relationship with your agency, if you take your internal stakeholders on the journey with you, it's actually really rewarding. This is going to sound very trite, but it's probably one of the proudest days of a marketeer's life when you launch a new website. It's great. I did that. It's your baby, yeah.
I mean, I'm really proud, and all of we submitted our website to the Construction Marketing Awards and won Best User Website, which it's great recognition for me and for the business, but actually for the team, the whole team that were involved. We got some great internal recognition, brilliant feedback from, right from the chairman down, but actually having that external marketing recognition of your work is, we're all marketeers, you all understand what that means. And I was super proud, of everyone that contributed. And it was a lot of late nights, a lot of Sunday content writing. But it was fantastic to have that achievement, and let's see where we go next year, see if we can enter any more.
No, I would absolutely agree. It's a little bit like it's your baby. I think when we launched, I was expecting this overwhelming sense of relief that we'd kind of done it, but it really was a real sense of pride that we'd pulled it all together, and the business got so behind it, and it was great. We'd kind of communicated throughout what was happening and various different stages. We brought the brand in, we launched core values at the same time, and actually having the buy-in from the business and going out to site and seeing that they've embraced it all and that kind of thing. It's brilliant. But the website, the internal feedback was brilliant, and that just, it made you feel you'd listened to what people obviously were looking for and what they needed in things. But external awards and things as well, being able to actually have categories to actually put in things like that. We've talked about it previously, construction being very much project of the year, that kind of thing. For a marketing team to be able to go ahead and put in for awards like that is a great thing. But a real sense of kind of pride and stuff. Like Pete said, it was one of the best moments in my career. Loved it.